Hi, Ryan from 3D Printing Canada here. Today's episode, we're going to be unboxing the brand new Creality Ender 3 and building it as well, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Let's take a look inside. So on first look, really good packaging here. Everything's packed nice and tight. Nothing looks like it's moved around. Right on top, we have our instruction manual here. It also looks like there is a bed leveling card as well. We'll put that off to the side. We'll need that later. Print removal tool is also included as well. Quite nice. Always good to have. In our first bag of parts here, we seem to have, looks like some Allen wrenches. Yep, the tools we'll be needing for assembly, along with a pair of flush cutters. These are always great for trimming our filament. Some zip ties, along with the belts, screws, and remaining hardware as well. So that will come in handy. Put that bag off to the side. Moving on, we've got a second bag here. In our second bag, it looks like we have the idlers for the X-axis. I'll open this up. So we have a small sample of PLA filament by the looks of it. Not much, but enough to get you started. We have the Bowden couplers as well, so that will come in handy too. And what appears to be the Z-axis limit switch. A USB key. I'm assuming that there'll probably be some, oh sorry, this is actually a micro USB reader with a micro SD card, so there should probably be some print files on here to get us started with. And then it also looks like we have our X-axis idler by the looks of it. And then a very, very fine point needle. This is great for cleaning out your hot ends if you have a slight clog. So I'll put that back in the foam without stabbing myself. Put that off to the side. So we also have our power cable here. Nice, good quality, 3-prong. Like to see the ground on that. Looks good. And I believe this is the first part of the spool holder. Looks nice and metal. Let's go into here. Very well packaged. Everything is very nice and tight. Love the packaging on this. This looks to be both our extruder. This looks to be the same extruder that the CR10 has. And this looks to also be the X-axis motor as well with the V-slot wheels. So we'll put that off to the side there. Below that, we have the spool holder. Again, very similar to CR10. The Ender 3 is unique because it's basically a scaled down CR10. Same extruder, same electronics package, just a smaller overall footprint and a slightly smaller build volume. I believe it's a little bit over 8 by 8, and I think it might be about 10 inches in the Z. So moving on, it looks like we've got two pieces of V-slot extrusion here. I believe one of these will be for the X-axis, and then the other will be the top of the frame as well. So we'll put that off to the side. Underneath this little piece of foam, we have two pieces of our 20 by 40 V-slot. This is actually the uprights for the actual main frame. So unlike the CR10 where our upper frame is all one piece already assembled, there is some more assembly to it. But thankfully everything looks to be pre-tapped, very easy to put together. One thing to note, inside of the extrusion itself is this little tube, and inside of that is our lead screw. So this looks like to be a single lead screw, looks nice and straight. So we'll put that back in there to protect it for now. We'll put that off to the side. So, we also have our Z motor. Screws are already mounted as well, so things are looking good there. Our lead screw just mounts to that, so we'll put that off to the side. Right here. On the slot here in the front, it looks like we have the opposite carriage for the X-axis. This is only a single lead screw system, so unlike the new CR10S's, this only has a single lead screw for it. So, but the overall size, we should have about the same rigidity in it. So we'll put that there. This little guy, if I can pull it up carefully. A nice full LCD screen for it. Really nice knob for it. Looks quite nice. I'm assuming that will print or attach to the front of the frame. And it looks like that should be the majority of the components. And then we should have here carefully, it looks like the entire base of the unit. Oh. Okay. Carefully trying not to snag some wires. It looks like the base of the unit with the electronics, the bed, and the extruder all come pre-wired, so that's really nice to see. And the belts are in place as well. Slide this down a bit, and we'll put this right here. So the hot end looks very familiar. It's actually the same hot end on the CR10 itself. Same style extruder, same Bowden tubes, basically a clone or an exact same unit that's used on the CR10. So that's nice to see because that was a really well-received extruder system. And then below the base itself, and our last component in the box, is our power supply. If I have a look here, I believe this is a 24-volt power supply. Yes, 24 volts, really nice. I really like to see the printed enclosure as well. So that just keeps all the main electrical areas out of contact, safe to use. You're not going to short yourself out or anything on this. So that's really nice to see. And interestingly, that's the only printed part on this so far. Everything else has been full metal and looks to be really nice quality. So let's get this box out of the way and get assembling. So we've just taken some of the plastic off and unboxed some of the tools here. So we haven't missed any much. The first step in this, the instructions are pretty good. They're well laid out, they're well illustrated as well. And our first step here is putting the uprights on. So you're going to want to take your 20 by 40 extrusion here. We got 2 of these pieces. And we're also going to want to take the M5 by 45 screws. They also have a couple washers here for lock nuts. So open these guys up and get started. So a big difference on this compared to other printers is that there's not a lot of T-nuts in here. They've actually tapped the extrusion directly now, so it's really easy. So all we got to do here is tip it up on our side, and we'll see if we'll balance it. There we go, perfect. And we'll take our extrusion here. Both ends are tapped as well, and I believe, if looking at this, we do have, I believe this will go, you'll see 2 holes here. I'll illustrate here. I believe these are both for the Z-axis limit switch. So that will go on our, if we're looking at the front of the unit, that will go on our right side. So we'll actually take this unit here. Look at that. This is our power supply. Yep. To note for the right side of the unit here is you'll see 2 holes towards the lower half of the unit. That's actually for mounting our power supply. So all we need to do is just orientate that towards the rear of the unit so that we can mount our power supply later. So we'll just take our M5 by 45 screw, slide it through the bottom of our extrusion here, nice and easy, and then just start to thread it into our extrusion itself. This is actually for the Z motor. The Z motor mounts to the back of this, the lead screw goes to here. So we'll actually want to orientate those towards the rear of the unit here. So just towards the Y-axis motor. Okay, nice and snugged up. And that should cover both of our uprights. Perfect. Try not to be careful of the cables. We'll route all these cables afterwards and get it looking nice and clean. So our next stop then would be to mount the power supply here. So we're just going to mount our power supply right here. It's a little obscured from the back here, but you'll want to use your M4 by 20 screw. There's just 2 mounts of them, and you will get a couple extra screws in this entire kit. So don't be alarmed if you have got screws left over once you've assembled everything. So we're just going to line the screw hole up, and hopefully it goes in. Perfect. One nice thing to really see on this printer is they're actually using XT60 connectors for the main power supply. They're a really nice, beefy supply, and it really means that you don't have to do any sort of wiring at all to this printer. Go. And again, we'll just snug up the screws nice and tight until everything's nice and solid. Go. Make sure we're not snagging any of the cables, so I'll make sure that nothing's getting snagged or pinched while we assemble it. Okay, there, perfect. So I'll spin this around here. A bit Careful of the extruder. As you can see, just the 2 screws right there mount the power supply nice and rigid. So our next piece here is to actually mount the controller, or the main menu here. So this mounts just right to the front of the unit right here, and we're going to use our little small M5x8 screws. They're the really short, small little ones, and just 2 of those guys will mount that there right to the front. Put those over the side, and I believe that will be our second largest Allen key. I'll try and do this. Try and get it started here. And these thread right into the end of the unit itself. Perfect. If you're having trouble putting the front assembly on together, or anything for that matter, you can usually reorientate it in a direction that's a lot easier for you to work on. This makes life much easier. Okay, perfect. Start that one, and that one. And again, just snug everything down till it's nice and tight, and it'll be nice and good. Okay. And there we go. Carefully rotate this back over. So there we go, we've got our power supply mounted, and as well as our controller box as well. So our next step then will be to mount the Z motor. So the Z motor comes with the screws already attached to it and the bracket as well, and it's just going to mount into these 2 holes here on the back of the extrusion. So we'll just get those in there, get them started. And I believe this is the 3rd largest Allen key as well that you'll use for these screws, because they're a slightly different size. Go. Move the bed out of the way if it gets in your way. When you're assembling the printer, you'll want to be a little bit careful not to twist this extruder around too much or get it snagged on too much, because it's all one wired unit, so you don't want to risk damaging it while assembling it. Okay, perfect. Now we'll just want to mount our Z limit switch as well. Now this doesn't have auto bed leveling on it or assisted leveling, so you'll be manually leveling it. So when we mount this, we'll just mount it in the general position, and then later on we can adjust the Z height when we're actually doing our first print. So this is one of the only few parts that actually has the T-nuts on it. So we'll just want to align the T-nuts so they're nice and easy to go into the extrusion like so. And we'll mount them there. And it looks like I will need the 2nd largest wrench. Let's back them off a bit so the nuts grab, just like so. Now the instructions state that this should be about 32 millimeters from the bottom of this extrusion, and these extrusions are 40 millimeters high. So if I slide this up a little bit, the bottom of the Z bracket should be just about touching the screw on the side right here. But like I say, we'll adjust this later when we do our first print and leveling. There we go. So next in our assembly is our X-axis. The X-axis comes in a few different parts here. The main assembly here being our X-axis motor and our extruder. So what we're going to want to do here to mount that is locate you'll notice we have 2 different pieces of extrusion. We'll want to take the longer of the 2. This is what's used for the X-axis extrusion. The other short piece here will actually get mounted to the top here once we put our X-axis in place. So when we look at this the X-axis here, it's got a number of different holes on it. Most importantly, you'll notice there's a large cutout here and another one as well. These are actually to clear some of the nuts on the assembly itself. You'll see here that this actually does mount into that hole like so. So for the X-axis side, we'll want to ensure that the shorter distance of the holes is towards the X-axis motor, and then on the other side, the longer side. For these, like the other side, there's no T-nuts needed, they just thread directly in. We're just going to use our M4x16 screw. They've already got the lock washers in place. So we'll mount that now. It's a little bit finicky with this, simply because we have to kind of go through the assembly here and try and feed these into the hole. So bear with me, it's a little bit tricky. Okay. And we're going to use our second largest screw, or wrench again, to get in here and hopefully get these started. There we go. Okay. Well, congratulations. That was probably the most finicky part of the entire build. Nice and easy though, right? So once we've got that in place, we'll actually want to grab our extruder assembly, because we'll need to mount that to the extruder, or to the frame, before we actually put our idlers on the other side. So be careful when we put this in. Ensure that we're not nicking the wheels or scarring them, and it should slide on with a little bit of ease. If it's a little bit loose, we can always adjust the tension on this at a later date, once we get the printer assembled. So most importantly, you want to make sure that the nozzle is facing down and that the extruder is facing up. We don't want to mount this incorrectly and find out later that our printer's upside down. It doesn't work so well that way. So with that in place, I'm just going to lean it like so, and we're going to repeat the same procedure that we did for the motor mount for the idler mount as well. So you'll notice here that the holes are quite a bit further spaced apart, so it's a little bit easier this side. And we'll just thread those in there like that. And carefully. Easier said than done, of course. Go. You know what? I'll rotate this up. You want to be careful too. If the screw doesn't go in nice and smooth, you might be cross-threading it. And because these are aluminum, they'll rip out very easily. So if you do feel a little bit of resistance on the screw, just realign things and make sure things are going in nice and straight. There we go. Okay, nice and snug down. That's nice and tight. Okay. Now, what we got to mount next is our idler on the end here. So we'll go into the bag here and take out our idler. It's all pre-assembled. It actually goes on in the same fashion as what our Z-axis limit switch did. So we'll see here again, it's just got the two T-nuts. So we'll just want to align that with the bearings and the nuts towards the back side of the extrusion, like so. And I believe for this one, we'll want our second largest wrench. I always back off the screws just a little bit in case the T-nuts are a little bit too tight on them. They won't rotate around and actually grab the extrusion. So give it a little bit of a quarter turn backwards and then begin to tighten it. Now don't worry too much about the positioning on this right now. We can actually slide this idler back and forth on the extrusion and adjust our belt tension after we've assembled the printer. There we go. There we go, just like that. Okay. So we'll want to grab our GT2 timing belt here, and we'll attach that next, if we can get the bag open. Really impressed with the packaging so far. Everything's been well labeled and well thought out. This is a very easy assembly. Okay. So on the underside of the extruder here we have these two little slots right here. Our timing belt, you have to forgive me here for a minute, will fit into these slots here, and that's what attaches the carriages to the entire extrusion. So we'll do that next. I'll put it right here like that. And obviously you want to make sure that the teeth are facing towards the inside of the extrusion onto the pulley itself. So we'll just put that there, like so. And we'll feed this through. Very carefully grab my pliers here just to feed this over the pulley, just like so. Okay. Now we'll want to rotate it through the other side of the pulley here making sure that the teeth are matching up against the profile. And hopefully I can grab that soon. It's a little bit more finicky than the CR10, but not by much. Shouldn't really take you all that long to put one of these together. So carefully grab that. Maybe. Rotate this upside down. Grab the wrench here. There we go. Sorry about that. It's just getting it around that pulley. That's a little bit of a tricky situation. Okay. And while we're here, we always want to make sure that the pulley or the belt remains on the pulley itself. The last thing we want to do is put this together and then realize that the pulley is not matching with the belt at all. So we'll actually want to slide this underneath the wheels. It should fit. Here we go, like so. The belt itself will fit right in the extrusion, which is nice. Keeps it nice and concealed, and it also removes the pinch hazard too. And we tighten that up. And then we'll just flip our assembly back over again, making sure that the belt goes over top of the pulleys. And we'll see if we can carefully pull this together. In fact, you can see it's a little tight, having a little bit of difficulty. So I'll just flip this on its side and undo the bolts on our pulleys a bit and move it in. So now that we've got our belt and extruder mounted, we're just going to pull on the idler a little bit here, just so we got nice tension on it, and then just tighten it down. We can always adjust this later on if we find the tension's a little bit too loose. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Now our X-axis is complete. The only thing we have left to do now is mount it to the rest of the frame and put our lead screw into place. So we're going to grab our lead screw here. I've just removed the plastic covering from it, and I'm just going to let it sit right here. I'm not going to tighten it at all. I'm just going to let it rotate freely. And then, with some luck, we will align our wheels. Actually, you know what? My apologies. I just tried to put it on upside down. That wouldn't have been wise. Like so. Like so. There we go. There we go. And give me. Okay, there we go. And very carefully, we'll start to screw our lead screw here into the frame. And because this is a nice tight setup, it should automatically pull our wheels down. There we go. As well, just back this off a little bit. Okay, so we've just threaded our X-axis onto the lead screw here. If you're finding it's a little tight and it doesn't want to cooperate too well, take your large wrench here, and on the inside of these wheels there is an eccentric nut. That will adjust the spacing between these two wheels here and make things a little bit looser for it to actually go on easier. We can always adjust it later if it's a little bit too loose and tighten up then. But it should move nice and freely up and down. So I'm just going to lower this down here. And also when we look at the printer from the back or from the side, this should look relatively parallel and flat to the bed. And it looks pretty good. So I'll just move this down out of our way. And that's the majority of the build right here. We actually got a lot of screws left still and a lot of extra parts, but that's not a problem. It's a nice thing of always having some extra parts, right? Okay, so with that down out of the way, I'll just flip this around. Our last major piece here is the top brace that goes right in here. So we're actually going to use our M5 by 25 screws. This is the last bag of screws we have. And we'll need 4 of them for each side, or 2 for each side. Like all the rest of the screws, they already have a lock nut in place, or a lock washer in place. So those will just thread in through the top right here. And actually, my apologies, I put it on backwards. So one thing to note, make sure you don't do what I just did, is you'll see on one side of the profile, the screw heads have actually been recessed here. The holes for the screws heads have been recessed. So you want to make sure those are facing up. Otherwise, the screw won't go all the way in. we'll get that one started. Come over to our other side and do the same thing, like so. And I believe this will actually be your largest Allen wrench, like so. And we'll just get that tightened down. There. And there. You might want to keep a rag or a paper towel around. The screws have a little bit of oil on them as well, and if you're adjusting the lead screw, it's also got some machine oil on it to keep it nice and smooth. So if you find you're getting greasy fingers throughout the build, just take a paper towel and wipe down your hands. It won't affect anything, so you can always just wipe down the printer if you get grease marks over it. There we go. And the last one right here. Perfect. Perfect. And perfect. Great. So our last part that remains for us now is just the spool holder. We can mount it forwards, backwards, it really doesn't matter. I typically, because the extruder is on the rear of the machine here, like so, careful not to pinch the wires, we'll probably mount it towards the back with the spool holder like this. That way it has a nice clear filament path to the extruder. So these, I believe, should be our remaining two M4 T-nuts and our M4 by 14 screws. Correction on that, my apologies. That would be the M5 by 8. So we'll actually take our M5 T-nuts. And the nice thing about these is these drop right into the frame, nice and easy. Alternatively, if you find they're not falling into the frame, sometimes they will do that, I'll just pull this out. We can actually just screw that right onto our spool holder itself. So we'll take two of our M5 by 8 screws and then just thread them through the hole right here. But we'll put it right about here for now, and that will be our second largest Allen key. Just like the CR10, the nut just comes off the end of the spool holder here, and we'll just mount both of these on. Tighten this off, flip it around to the other side. That might not work. And we just spin that into place. Snug it down. And there we go. So our hardware at this point is basically all assembled. Last two little pieces, and the most important pieces, of course, can't forget your printer with these, are these little end caps. All these do is just snap onto the side right here and just finish off the profile. So it makes it look a little bit more professional. There we go. Just like so. So that's the main hardware built. All that remains at this point now is just the electronics. So with our main mechanical assembly all done, all that really remains for us now is just the electronics. A word of note though, the power supply here on the rear, I'll turn it slightly here so you can see more, has a voltage selection. This is really important. For North America we use 110 volt, for Europe's 220. So you'll want to have a look here at this little switch here. Right now it's set to 220 voltage. So we'll actually want to take just our cutters or a little screwdriver and just stick it in there carefully and slide that switch down, so it's 110 volt. If this was in Europe, or if we were in Europe using 110 voltage with this power supply, we could do some damage with it. For us here, we just want to make sure it's set to 110. So the electronics wiring on it's very easy. Our main power supply here is the XT60 connectors here, and they're already keyed, very nice and easy. They just snap together. They do include a number of zip ties here that you can do all your wire management and cable management how you like. We're just going to assemble things here and just get everything connected for it. You can always clean that up afterwards. The bed, extruder, already pre-wired, we don't have to worry about that. So our next main connector here is the Z-axis motor. They are keyed and they're also labeled nicely. So it's a little tricky, but it is long enough to fit. And as soon as we go right here, just like so. And then if I spin this printer around a little bit, we then have our Z-axis limit switch as well. And the connector's on the bottom here, so bear with me. It'll take me a little bit of finicking to get this one in. Again, everything's pre-labeled, and you can refer to your instructions if you're unsure of anything. There we go. So the last main cable harness is just this large guy right here. Again, we have our X-axis motor, our Z-axis motor, and then one of the end stops as well. And they'll just key in just like the other ones did as well. So we'll feed the small tricky one in first. And the Z-axis or the X-axis limit switch is just inside by the pulley right here. So you'll just have to carefully get that inserted, just like so. They are labeled nicely. You can see this has got a wee little E on it for extruder. So we'll mount that next, just like so. And then lastly, our X-axis motor, and I'll feed this around this way. And the connector's just on the bottom. So like I say, with the included zip ties, you can route the wiring yourself and keep it away from all the moving parts. That way it doesn't fray and get caught in motion and anything. The last remaining connection we have is actually on the bottom of the unit here. So I'm going to rotate it over on the side, and it's for the LCD screen. Be careful to lean it on its side right here. And it's this long ribbon cable. It's a keyed connector. It's got a little key on the top here. And we'll see on the bottom of our board right here, we have 3 connectors. We'll want to plug this into the expansion 3, which is all the way over here on the very far side. And then that's it. Your Creality Ender 3 is completely assembled at this point, and you can begin the process of leveling the bed and getting your first print. So that's it for our assembly and electrical connections on it. In our next video, we'll cover the first print and getting this printer all set up. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and remember to like our video on YouTube, and to also click the notification bell, share our video as well, and leave a comment below if you've got any questions. Thank you.